My boyfriend and I have been together for 2 years. He's a good heart and is normally rational, but his one issue is that he expects to accompany me in every occasion no matter how big or small. He even went with me to my ex-boyfriend's funeral after days of begging. Now my best friend got married few days ago. It was very small and only close family and friends were invited. My boyfriend couldn't come because of the +1 rule. He pitched a hissy fit saying my best friend has no respect for my relationship and was shocked when he learned that I was still going to attend. He told me that if he can't go then I'm expected to not go as well, but that is my best friend and I had to respect her rules. He gave me an ultimatum: either we go together or I stay home with him. I ended up going cause again I respected my friend's rules. He was angry with me and kept calling the entire 2-hour drive, then stopped. Later I got a text from his friend telling me my boyfriend, got into an accident and was taken to the hospital. I freaked out. He gave me the address and I had to leave the wedding and told my friends why. I was crying the entire drive home and kept calling his friend but got no response. I arrived to the hospital and asked about my boyfriend and they checked and told me he wasn't there. My anxiety reached 160% as I kept calling his friends one by one. I just went home and there he was, along with his friend. He saw me and said that he was sorry, but this was the only he can get me home after I left him alone. After the initial shock, I just blew up yelling at him about lying and making me leave my friend's wedding, and having me literally go to the hospital and freaking out cause of him. I kicked his friend out and we got into an argument. He kept talking about how much I love him, thus I left, which is my own doing, not his, and he was just trying to see if I really chose my friend's wedding over him. He then argued that my friend caused this and I shouldn't agree with her to exclude him. I said what he did was horrible and called him horrible and then went to my room. It was awful cause my friends kept calling to check in on him cause they thought he was really at the hospital. He said I overreacted and that I yelled at the wrong person. He has a history of mental health issues but got better the past few months. He also had a recent death in his family which really affected his health generally. I bought a house a few months ago and moved in last month. The previous owner was a friendly old man that could no longer live alone, so he decided to sell and move in with his daughter. Just to be clear now, apparently he had been allowing use of his driveway to his disabled neighbor lady, largely because street parking is extremely limited and what little street parking there is pretty much instantly occupied. What I am saying is unless you have a driveway you end up having to park a good 5-minute walk away, and that's the best case scenario. I put disabled in quotation marks because the lady in question is just really overweight and I am not sure if that counts as disabled. Obviously I was unaware of this, so I was surprised to see a large SUV parked in my driveway when I moved in. I ended up having to knock on several doors asking whose car it was because the movers could not stand still on the busy road too long. I figured out it was the neighbor's car, so after a good 10 minutes of knocking, an extremely angry enormous lady opened the door. I told her to move the car and she immediately started arguing that the neighbor said it was fine. I told her he moved out. I moved in and no, it is not fine, and to move it because the movers need to unload my stuff. She begrudgingly did. I ended up seeing her walking back half an hour later completely wet with sweat. Now a few days later I went back to work and lo and behold, the SUV is parked in my driveway again. I go over there again, spend 20 minutes knocking on the door before this lady opens the door, again, visibly angry. I tell her to move her car. My driveway is not public parking. She protests, saying her ankles can't take walking the distance and claims I can easily walk. I tell her that while that might be true, it's my goddamn driveway and I want to park there myself. Again she moves her car. Again I spot her half an hour later drenched in sweat making her way home. Well, it happened again a week ago and this time she would not open her door. I got tired of it and had her SUV towed. She of course came to my house to scream at me. I told her to get the hell off my property. A few days later I had a small fence installed with a lock on it to make sure it did not happen again. I have since been getting dirty looks from her and one other neighbor, and when I told my mom she told me I should be nicer to people. I do feel sort of bad too. She clearly struggles with the walk after all. My boyfriend Steve and I have been dating for over a year and a half. I met him in one of my upper level classes 2 years ago. At the time he was finishing up his degree, before moving on and working on his master's. Since we started talking, seeing each other, and dating casually, I really loved our entire relationship. Steve and I had a lot of similar interests, which included traveling. We did a small trip to South America a couple months ago for a few weeks, Peru and Chile. We had an amazing time. It was once we got back from our trip that I saw our relationship in a whole different way. We traveled well together, and bonded in a new way. I knew I was in a great relationship. I thought we had a great relationship, until I got some news a few days ago. 3 days ago, I went over to drop a MacBook charger over at my best friend's house, Chenille. Chenille and I have been best friends since we were in high school from the age of 16 years old. I have always considered her to be my number one and closest person in my life. I have noticed that the past 6 months we haven't hung out in the same capacity that we usually have. Both of us have been busy with our lives, school, work, relationships, etc. But I kinda got the feeling after this past year of university around April that she was starting to move away. She had a bad with her ex that lasted under a year. He cheated on her with a coworker, and the rest is history. They broke officially around the end of January. As I went over to drop off her extra charger that she borrowed, I talked with her mom for a bit. Chenille ended up getting called in to pick up an extra serving shift at the restaurant she has worked at during her degree. Her mom wanted to talk to me about a few things. I was puzzled. Chenille's mom was always really outgoing and funny. We had known each other for over 8 years at least. But she wanted to have a serious talk. Chenille's mom, Karen, went on to tell me that she saw Steve and Chenille sneak around the back of the house about a month or so ago. Karen went on to explain that she noticed this happening 2 other times. At first, she thought we were all hanging out. But Karen told me that she got a weird gut feeling on this situation. She told me that I should talk to Steve and Chenille ASAP. Steve and I were supposed to go out for dinner last night. He picked me up, and off we went. I felt really bad and humiliated the entire time we were out. We ate dinner, had a couple drinks, but we didn't talk much. Steve kept asking me all night what was the matter. I told him nothing. Finally, when we got back to my place, we sat in my room and I asked him, and told him what Chenille mom, Karen, is told me. He didn't answer. In fact, he went pale white. That gave me the answer I needed. I broke down and Steve tried to comfort me. I didn't want him touching me. I didn't even want to hear it. I told him to leave, but I basically had to force him to leave. I tried calling Chenille and texted her that I needed to talk to her. I got no response. Not one. Basically, 2 of the closest people I have had in my life betrayed me. This is so terrible and I feel so bad. I have like no one right now. My fiancé Ollie and I have been together for 4 years, living together for 2, recently got engaged. Our relationship has been great for the most part. One of the few things we disagree on is animals. I love animals and Ollie feels indifferent towards most animals. To give a little background about me, I've always been an animal lover. Throughout my childhood, my mom hated animals, especially dogs. My mom never let us have any pets and she used to tell us that once we were adults we could have whatever animals we wanted. When I moved away for college, I lived on campus for 4 years, and therefore couldn't have any pets. I've wanted a dog for as long as I could remember, but up until recently it wasn't in the cards for me to have a dog. Ollie and I currently live in a not-so-pet-friendly city for renters. I always lived in apartments that never allowed pets, even with a pet deposit. When Ollie and I met, I told her about wanting to get a dog someday. Ollie told me that she doesn't like a lot of dogs, but would be open to the right dog. This was in the very beginning of us meeting. I basically made it really clear that I will own a dog one day. Throughout our relationship, I would occasionally bring up wanting a dog. Ollie would remind me that our apartment doesn't allow for pets, which was true. Ollie and I agreed that once we moved into a place that allowed for pets, we would look into getting a dog. About 2 months ago, Ollie and I moved into a house just outside of the city we work in. The house is a good size for the 2 of us, plus extra. The landlord is pet-friendly, and the house has a huge, fenced-in yard. It's a much more residential area, and there's a dog park about 3 blocks from the house. On top of the house being perfect for a dog, I'm in a financial place where I can afford a dog. I make very good money and I don't have to travel for work. I'm mentally prepared for potential pet fees and other expenses for having people watch the dog. Since we're finally settled in the house, I decided to mention to Ollie again about going to the shelter and looking at the adoptable dogs. Only this time, Ollie didn't have an excuse for why we couldn't get one. After a few weak excuses, sometimes we go away, Ollie broke down and told me that she doesn't want a dog. In fact, she's never wanted a dog. She was hoping I would forget about my dreams of wanting a dog. I'm not sure what to do. I'm trying to reason with Ollie, but she said her answer will always be no to a dog. She just doesn't like them and doesn't want them. She basically gave me an ultimatum, either her or my potential dog. I'm feeling shitty about this, because I always made it clear to her that I was going to want a dog someday. I feel like she was banking on something unrealistic, and now she's putting me in a lousy spot.